Calling the November 14th meeting of the Transport Advisory Committee to order. And we'll do a quick roll call. Just say your members, say your names and such. Dan?
Here, Dan Schrager.
Laura?
Here.
Mariana? You there? Says
It
you're
shows her
connected.
as still connecting.
There she
Hi,
is.
Mariana, you present?
Present.
Okay, great, thanks. You're in two places at once, okay. And Ellen?
Here.
And I'm here. Did I miss anyone? Phil? I hear you. Mark?
Mark Aylis, I'm here.
Okay, I think that's everyone. Did I miss anyone? Okay. Let's see. So first thing on the agenda was approval of minutes. Minutes went around. I had a couple of minor typos. I sent back. I got them. Anyone else have any comments on the minutes? Mark,
You sent them to me or me and Heather?
you and him.
Okay, then we got them.
Okay, so this may duplicate some things Nick had, but Mike Lawson is chair of the Economic Vitality Committee. There was a blank line there. Nick communicated with Mike Lawson, chair of the Economic Vitality Committee. And then in the seventh bullet, I think it's better to say Mark Aylis then reported on a second contract with separate funding, $170,000. Because it's important, I think the current writing confuses the two contracts. So did Elizabeth, did you get that, or do you want me to email you?
Yes, if you can email them to me. If anybody else, if you, can you mute yourself? Because we're getting a little feedback. Yes, if you just email them, to me, we can make those changes.
Okay, so I'll read them off so that it can be approved. So Mr. Gillis then reported on a second separate contract with separate funding of $170,000. Approximately $69,000 remains unspent on the first contract. And then there's a part where it says engage with MassDOT when the state, not states, chooses. And then the only other thing I would say for consistency is everywhere town or state appears and it means a particular town or state, it's capitalized.
Okay, are you gonna email those into?
Yes, I'll email that to Elizabeth.
Okay, great. That's sufficient. Thanks. And Phil is now here. Phil? Present.
Morning.
Good morning.
Okay, or I would entertain a motion to approve the minutes with those amendments.
I had moved the minutes be approved as amended.
Second, Phil?
Second.
Okay, all in favor? Dan?
Yes.
Mariana?
Yes.
Laura?
Yes.
Mark?
Yes,
Myself? Yes.
Yes.
And
Yes.
Phil, yes, okay, unanimous. Okay, moving on, Chair's report, okay, I'll give what I have, and then Mark, if you have anything too. Let's see, I spoke with Steve Dukran about the Stantec project, and he reports that in terms of the first and most urgent thing, which is getting everything together for the budget, and the capital budget, that's making good progress. They've given all the information that's been requested by Stantec, and so that's moving right along. Until that's done, no work's being done on the second project, the bigger part, for whatever. I forget all the details of it, but anyway, so we're making good progress on the budget requirements. And let's see what else. Let's see, Climate Action Committee has sent us a document, sent us actually the last climate action plan, requesting that we get involved in developing the transportation sections for the next version of the plan. And I think the best way to handle that might be, Ellen, you used to be in that committee, right?
No, I'm sorry. I've been, otherwise I'm occupied the last 2 months, and so I didn't go, I didn't
okay.
follow up on that, but no, that we should
Maybe it's a committee?
Well,
What are you proposing?
what I would suggest is maybe just someone, just to get the ball rolling, someone look over their plan and put some thoughts together that we could discuss at the next meeting, on what sections, you know, for instance, the existing plan has a whole thing on electric cars, which I don't think is a great interest to us, whether cars are electric or internal combustion in terms of our mission. So, but there are other clear things that they have in there, like public transit, and so
I'll
maybe.
do that, sure.
You do that, yeah, so to put together your thoughts on that and then send a paper around through Elizabeth
And Heather,
and Heather. For us to look over before the next meeting, we'll have a discussion on it and then we can figure out how to proceed with the
Perfect.
with the
Okay.
committee. Okay.
Yeah.
I'd rather do that than just push two committees together and not get. much
No, we
done
need
for an hour.
something to discuss, I think, to make it productive.
Yes. Okay, that would be good. And let's see, on the chair's report, MCI committee, has also sent out something just to everyone in town, inviting participation in their process. And, I will put together something on that we can discuss at the next meeting or subsequent meeting on. What I'm thinking of is just a document that says, here are things you should have in mind, MCI committee, while you're beginning to discuss various possibilities, issues around transportation, just so they can hopefully have that in their mind as they're thinking about this alternative or that alternative and what the implications are. And then once they get a little further down the road, we can engage with them with more detail.
I actually was at the meeting and sent an email suggesting, really strongly, I think what you'd say as well, multimodal. Take advantage of the fact that the Bruce Premium Rail Trail's right there, the
Right.
commuter rail, the Espet Bridge. And make it, I think what I said to them, do not make it car centric.
Right. Yes,
We'll see that. I think that's probably because there was a statement at that meeting, something about a garage being put in. And so, there was some kind of thing about, lots of parking and I thought, no way.
so let me just preface, there are no decisions.
Oh, no, I didn't mean
There-
that.
No, other than I think the community consensus is they don't want an Amazon warehouse. But other than that, anything you hear about, oh, this is gonna go there, that's gonna go there, that is, not the case. There's been no conversation about it, and that's what MCI Concord Advisory Committee, with the help of a planning consultant, will start the visioning process and then the zoning process and so that's where that is.
Yeah, it's my opinion, we should get in there quickly with as you said, with a vision that's transit oriented, just because it's moving so fast. But I understand that they were clear about that there no decisions, that everything was input at this point.
So I have one other piece of information to add. I had a conversation with Dan Gainsborough, who's one of the committee
Okay.
members last night. And Dan mentioned that the committee is putting together an RFP to engage a consulting firm.
Yeah.
They actually have a very substantial budget for that consulting firm. And he and I discussed that it was a good idea for the consulting firms to have a mandate to talk with one another, so that, whoever's engaged on the MCI side should be clear that they should be in good communication with Stantec, so that their,
Perfect.
their missions are, integrated, and that they're clear that we expect them to talk with one another and they're not
Mhm.
to work in separate silos. He said, yes, you should definitely report that little bit of information to the TAC. So
Thank you.
you're welcome.
okay. Okay. And moving along,
Laura had a comment and I.
Oh, I'm sorry. Laura?
Mark.
Just a super quick comment. I just wanted to let folks know that there's a really interesting sort of case study out there that you might want to read about when we're thinking about like what does a low car development potentially look like. And there are lots of articles about it. It's called cul-de-sac, as in like I live on a cul-de-sac. It's in Tempe, Arizona, and it's just an interesting example of a it's actually a car-free development that was built in an extremely car-dependent city. Tempe, Arizona is not known for being a particularly transit-rich place. So I'm not saying that this is an exact thing that should be built in Concord, but it is a nice case study to look at while we're trying to sort of develop recommendations and blueprints for what could a less car-dependent development look like.
Is there a link to that or something? Did you
I-
say?
I can send around a link to it. And just
That would
so
be great.
you know, I've just been following the development of this community and reading articles about it because I think it's an interesting case study.
Great.
I'll send
Okay.
some stuff around.
Thank you. Okay,
Mark?
yes, Mark.
You're muted, Mark.
Thank you very much, Elizabeth. So, yeah, a couple of quick things. So for the December 5th meeting, we're going to have Transaction Associates come talk about regional public transit, et cetera. So I would ask all the members to kind of think and write down for themselves specific questions they would like to bring up with them. That might be helpful. And again, back to the MCI redevelopment thing, I think Nick said he was going to write something down, and that's great. But if people kind of think about what, simple, very helpful, clear message to send about priorities rather than sort of a laundry list. So like what Ellen is saying, don't make it car centric, or what Laura is saying about, maximize the non-car functionality. I think, we need a kind of a simple, clear, high level message input, because it's going to go into a complicated process with a lot of expert jargon and things like that. We've got to keep beating the same drum. One other thing, recently there have been some requests from TAC members to staff for documents, which it certainly makes sense. We have a lot of documents to kind of collect, et cetera, but I would suggest possibly, unless there's some kind of emergency situation, it might be better for TAC and for functioning and for staff, if a TAC member is identifying that there's some documents that are not ready to hand, et cetera, bring the request. I would suggest possibly bringing the request or that notice to the next TAC meeting, have the TAC members kind of fine tune that request to staff, and then staff could send the documents or a description of where they are or why they're not available to all of TAC, so that we're all sort of on the same level and staff is not confused about what is a TAC request and what's an individual request, etc. That's all I wanted to mention.
Yeah, along those lines, Elizabeth, you mentioned there were some issues in redesigning the TAC webpage. Any prognosis for when we might have different design, the design we're working towards?
It's probably next week.
Oh,
Heather will
that's
have-
soon. Oh, great.
We'll have
Okay.
the page recreated and then we can start editing.
Great. Okay, good. Okay,
Not a problem.
good. I think that'll help, Phil, because that'll give us a place to stick or have pointers to most of these things so people can go to one place to get access. Okay, any other members' comments? No? Okay. Next topic is discussion of a framework document for data collection related to development of public transit. So I wrote something up and it was sent around by Heather. And where I'm coming from in this is, it seems to me that there may be some unspent planning dollars with Stantec from the first contract that was let out. If there were, this document is the sort of data that I'd like to see collected. So for instance, primarily it's a statement of information to be collected from other towns that have done something, neighboring towns that have done something along the lines of public transit. What have they done? How did they fund it? Has it succeeded or failed? What issues did they encounter? It's all here, but if anyone, I thought what we could do is, if you've had time to look at this, if you have any deletions, corrections, additions, suggestions to add to it, maybe we could come up with one document and then submit it to the planning department and say, hey, if there's money, we would like to put this in the queue for ways to spend that money if it's still there, because we think we very much need this information if we're gonna make any progress on public transit in Concord. We need to know what's worked and not worked in the surrounding communities with detail. So, anyone had a chance to look at it and have any comments on it? What was sent around?
Yeah.
Do you want me to take him?
Hmm?
Do you want me to take him?
He's happy.
He's very happy.
Mark's got his hand up.
Well, Mark,
Thanks, Nick. Yeah, no, I think it's very good. I think as has sort of been discussed before, having a town hired consultant interact with on behalf of the planning division with their kind of counterparts in the other towns is going to be a more organized, official, probably fruitful process than TAC members reaching out or trying to set up meetings, et cetera. And we might get more quantitative documents or more useful information. So I think it's a great list and a great idea. I'm not sure the best way to put it into the Stantec process. I assume if Steve Dukran is still the nominal administrator of that, it needs to be passed on to him, but with awareness of planning and everything.
Bill?
So I guess the question is, how broad a net should the information be gathered from? So we could limit it to the surrounding towns, or maybe we could expand it a bit to include all of the state, for example, because there are a number of different.
300
places.
towns?
Well, no, but there are places in town, there are places in the state where you know you have regional transit or local transit, like Northampton and the 5 colleges area where there was a transit system there. Or you might want to have a sort of national overview. So I think it's just a think how far do we want to look to find analogous transit systems, and that
It's
may
probably a trade-off between money.
and
Yeah.
and time.
And time.
But-
So generally speaking, I would probably not recommend going outside of the Commonwealth. Cause
Laws are different.
laws, funding mechanisms, it just, there are so many communities that are doing so many great things. But they have set themselves up for success for public transit through, different regulations and funding mechanisms. That we're not there.
Yeah.
So, generally from a planning perspective, the words are, looking at the surrounding, communities and comparable towns. So they can,
That's a good
whether,
addition, the comparable towns.
so like, the town of Air, has a commuter rail station. It's, popular wise, it's and acreage wise, it's not as big as, Concord, but, demographically, whether, a public transit, loop between, Concord and, Air and Littleton and Groton, and so they're,
Good point.
that's generally just
Yeah.
in the planning,
Mhm.
you say comparable communities.
Okay. that makes
Yeah,
sense.
that's sort of nice to think about, because I was thinking like, oh, the ones that are, best in class. Yet if they don't have the components we have, like the mass transit, the rail system, which is really unique. And just maybe just the way having a commuter rail there, that's a component you want to bring in.
That's good.
I'm not sure Northampton has that. Much as I love Fiveco.
Okay. Anyone else? Laura?
Yeah, so I just want to ask the question, what exactly are we hoping to get? I guess, I don't know how to phrase this. You know, we've gone over some of these things in our meetings, like, you know, we looked at the Lex Express, we looked at the Bedford, Transit. Yeah, and we looked at, you know, where their funding coming from, what are they, you know, how much are they collecting in fare box revenue? That's all
When you
public.
say, excuse me, when you say we looked at that, what does it mean? Because I've never seen specific numbers.
So we had a meeting. I brought the publicly available documents that break down where
Oh,
are
I
all the
remember,
funding
yeah.
sources coming from, where like what is their total cost and how is that allocated across operations and stuff. That's all publicly available. There are also a lot of great reports that have been written about public transit in Massachusetts. So a lot of this is like publicly available documents that, you know, could be curated and read without a lot of work from Stantec. I would urge us to use Stantec's expertise to make some actionable plan that could be like tested on, you know, Concord residents. You know, give us 4 proposals for a potential public transit service so we could go to a public meeting and ask for feedback specifically on concepts. Because one of the things that we do know from previous conversations about public transit is that we are very unique. We are not like our neighbors in that we are not part of an RTA at the moment. You know, Bedford, Acton, or maybe not Bedford, but I know that Acton, Sudbury, those are actually part of 2 different RTAs, and we're an MBTA community, but we're on the edge. Like our situation in Concord is very unique. So we've already looked at our neighbors, and we know that like Lexington's public transit service is funded through a grandfathered program that's not available to municipalities today. So looking at the way that they're funding their operations might not be very useful to us, since that funding stream is grandfathered in and we wouldn't have access to it. So I just wonder if we could, I mean, if we're going to spend money with Stantec, let's get something out of it that's very unique to Concord and not just sort of a general survey. Because I could send you some like general reports about how public transit is functioning in communities in Massachusetts, but I'm not sure how actionable that information is going to be. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Well, yes, but whatever plan comes out needs to be based on solid information about what's been tried and what's worked and what isn't working.
Well, and I would
And
hope that
what we
Stantec
have-
has the expertise to know something about best practices in this field. Their transportation, you know, like this is their specialty. So, I mean, unless we think that they've never done public transit planning before.
We don't know what information they have about these towns. So what we've done is we've gotten some pieces of information, like the ones that you brought to the group, but we don't have a good database, a good grounded set of data to answer questions like, well, you know, what we're gonna get in town is we're gonna get questions like, well, Acton tried this, how did it work? You know, and we don't have the information on that right now, right? And
But
it's not
the information that's available on every,
Acton has shut down the Crosstown Connect, I understand, and they're only running the on-demand service now. So what does that mean? Does that mean you can't do it? That it's not gonna work? I don't know. I just think we need a sort of an up-to-date collection of data that says what's been tried, what's working, what isn't working, rather than just trusting that the consultant's gonna come up with a plan that's gonna work for Concord. I think the town of Concord's gonna wanna see what's been tried, what worked, what didn't work, and then therefore, why does this plan that you're putting on the table gonna be successful? That's all.
I just
So
don't think, I just worry that we're going to be in perpetual planning mode. You know, this information is publicly available. I'm happy to send around the resources again and curate some other reports that are publicly available.
If you have the time to answer all the questions that are here, I'm fine with going to the next stage.
Wait a minute, let's have a
Just-
discussion about it. Did Mark, sorry.
Mark, did you want to talk?
Yeah, with, Ellen, you can go first if you were,
Oh, I was just gonna say, I'm sensitive to what Elizabeth is saying about what is comparable. So, I mean, to me, that should be the first step. Who has attributes like Concord, just be aware of that, and then pull in towns, like Lexington might not be comparable because they don't have the train going right through, and then pull in information, and that's number two. Like, first, what does comparable mean? And they probably have to have a commuter rail. Two, what has been tried in towns and with awareness of what is happening in comparable towns. And then three, I think it's really a great idea of having Stantec propose specific solutions for it's, as a final step for consideration in the public forum. Because I think people need to see something real as opposed to, otherwise I think we get one-off arguments about specific elements of the plan.
I agree with that if the specific proposals explain why it's gonna work in the context of what's been tried in other communities and failed or succeeded. I just don't think it's, I don't, the thing I don't wanna see is just, here's some proposals. Well, wait a minute, why is this gonna work when it didn't work in Acton? That's the question, those are the questions we need to be able to answer.
So I have two things. One is, Laura, thank you. I think you anticipated my question, which was, can you resend the information and remind us of the date? Because I remember
I don't
sitting through your
remember.
presentation, but I don't remember what date it was. So we can go back and recap that. And I think this is an opportunity for having the consultant come to us on a Zoom link or however they prefer to answer Nick's questions. Because at least some of Nick's questions strike me as the type of thing where someone who is a transportation engineer will say, well, I know that because that's what I do for a living. And here's why I know it. And here's, I read a professional journal every week to keep myself up to date on this stuff. And here's the data. And, rather than speculating about what they might or might not know or how their methodologies or where they get their information, we can just ask them the question and say, what's the source of your information? And, I think that might be a way of satisfying your concerns with immediacy rather than, oh, well, we're going to have a long bureaucratic process of asking a series of questions and waiting for weeks for a response. Have a meeting.
Okay, so yeah, so let me,
We've got a budget.
Yeah,
These
yeah.
people haven't spent it. Let's get them here.
so
Let's
yeah,
get
I'm
it done.
okay with going to the consultant and saying, ultimately, what we want is a plan for
Yeah.
public transit.
Mhm.
And give us a plan, but show us why you think it's gonna work based on what's been tried in these comparable communities. That's it.
Yeah, so let's talk.
Yeah,
So,
Elizabeth,
Terry has her hand up, but then I'll follow up after that.
I don't see your hand, Terry, but did you wanna talk?
She's got it up there.
She's
Yellow.
up.
Oh, there you are. You're in two places, Terry.
Oh,
Go
Hi,
ahead.
can you hear me? I'm having a little bit of technical difficulty. Can you hear me?
Yeah, yes.
Okay, one of the questions that I really have is, can we join an RTA? That is what comparable communities have done. And that's what's really missing. There's an RTA to the east of us, to the north of us, to the west of us, we're left out. And so a lot of what comparable communities did, we're not able to do. So how do we join it?
I do not know that answer, but I believe it's a complicated situation because of the MBTA and the
Right.
2 commuter rail stations and the assessment we
Right.
made.
So that's the question that I have for Stantec. How would it make sense to try to join one rather
I
than
don't think
taking
we
it
can,
on our
Terry,
own?
because we're part of the MBTA. And I think the RTAs were designed for communities that aren't served by the MBTA.
Oh.
The question has been asked before, so,
Right.
I'll see what I can find as far as the answer.
Hey, I also used to serve on I used, as part of a work thing, I used to serve on an RTA working group. So I can give you a little bit of context for this. people switching from MBTA to RTA has not really been done. That would be a very unusual thing for us to do. So that actually would be a great question for Stantec to research, because I asked a bunch of people about whether this was even a possibility, and nobody knew the answer to this.
Right,
Because it's not been done.
right.
You know, the territories of Massachusetts, you know, the Massachusetts has been divided up into RTAs and MBTA, and that map has pretty much been fixed for a long time. So, there are definitely communities served by the commuter rail that are in RTAs. Acton
Right.
is a good example of that. So it's not that that part is incompatible, but I don't know if anybody has switched. Or I don't believe anybody has switched, and people who I thought would know the answer to this question did not know the answer to this question. So that would be a good question to put on the list of things for them to research.
Okay. Carrie, did you have anything else?
No, that's good. I just think that question should be on the list.
Thank you.
What does it mean to be an RTA versus an MBTA community? I'm not sure I
RTAs
understand the
were,
difference.
Were set up because the state had created the MBTA, but it created nothing for the rest of the state. And so they declared that you could form regional transit authorities and that you could be like the MBTA in that sense.
Well,
Okay.
that's what the question is, what's the implication to be using an RTA versus being an RTA community? Is it
So
make a difference?
So there are, to our north is the Lowell-based Regional Transit Authority. To our south, Sudbury is Metro West Regional Transit Authority. So that one's the most active in like Wellesley in that area. It's just where the town pays their public transit assessment. And then, you know, if you wanted to have interconnected service, like if we wanted to have interconnected service with Acton, joining the RTA that Acton's a part of would make that easier. If we wanted to join Metro West's Regional Transit Authority and connect to what's happening in like Sudbury and Point South, that would be a different, not that there isn't connection between RTAs and between the MBTA, but you know, it's like their regional transit map is based in their communities, but they tend to be like focused on different hubs coming out. And so we're sort of like in this awkward place of being at the end of all of the things. Like we're not central to any of the transit authorities. So we're on the very far edge of MBTA, and we have no local bus service through the MBTA, which is what, you know, all of the more dense communities closer into the city have regional, you know, local bus service provided by the MBTA, excuse me.
Mark has his hand up as well.
Mark, again?
Thank you. Yeah, no, I like the idea of adding specific RTA related questions for the consultant to look at. I do think that however much information is publicly available of comparable communities or adjacent communities, then I do think there's a benefit in terms of going to the public to try to implement this, of having a separate professional consultant put these side by side and provide information, because no matter how much work we volunteers would do on it, I don't think it's going to have the same credibility for the public in terms of funding mechanisms and legal questions such as was raised about that MBTA versus RTA. But I was going to point out, add one other thing that occurs to me, and it's partly due to the fact when I was talking to the Economic Vitality Committee about worker transportation to help people get employees that are hard to get from places that don't have good transportation, or the employee doesn't have a car, and certainly applies to try to just, you know, enable people who don't have cars or people who don't need, you know, let them not have a car. So there are certain places with high density of population that are within sort of a half-mile driving radius, but it's not easy to get there by public transit. One place I think of as an example is Lowell. Lowell has MBTA, but I guess I just heard that it has RTA also. So another kind of trial balloon would be to say, how does one get from one RTA to another? I mean, if we wanted employees, people who lived in Lowell to be able to work in Concord without a car, you know, what would they do? They have to go into North Station and come back out on the train? There must be some way to square the, you know, connect the triangle. Anyway, but it's just another thought that there may be places. I mean, Burlington Mall is a place that some people want to go to back and forth for employment or shopping, and Lowell is a population center that's not too far away by car, but it's not, you know, for some reason, it's not connectable by public transit. That's all.
Okay. And you identify yourself?
Jordan Newbold, 124 Hillcrest Road. A couple comments in there. One is actually that the Burlington Mall is a transit stop in 3 separate transit systems. It has an MBTA bus route that ends there. It's also the end of a Lex Transit route and the end of a LRTA route. The other thing I wanted to mention is the question I had, assuming that we had enough money, would it be possible to just be part of 2 transit authorities and pay both of them for assessments?
Good question. That might be a good solution. Yes. Okay. Any other comments or questions? Okay, let's see, where do we go with this? Some good, I think that was, I really like the comment, Laura, about, you know, going towards a solution. And I also like the thought of Mark's thought about, which is where I was coming from. We really need sort of data that's been sanitized by a consultant or someone that's comparable from one community to another, so we can explain it inside the town. But we only need that to explain any proposals that are going to be brought forth. And I think some good questions have been put on the table about RTAs and whether or not we might just join them rather than start our own transit service or anything like that. So I think it requires a little bit more thought. And Elizabeth, I guess the only question is Steve Dukran our access to the remaining planning money, or is it the planning department, or if there's any remaining with Stantec?
I would say the questions and, you know, like if you're gonna amend that document, it would be a collaborated effort.
Okay,
So you can send them, you know, to me, and then I will coordinate with Steve on, you know, getting answers, also looking to have, you know, now that they're wrapping up that first piece, looking to have, you know, Stantec come and have, you know, a conversation about what data collection they've already done, and you know, the document that TAC's putting together and what they see, you know, their role and what, you know, what information they have, what information they need to get, and also just the next steps.
okay, so we'll create, I'll talk to Mark and we'll create a new version of this based on today's comments and feedback, and keep the conversation going. Okay. Good. Any other public comments, or is there any public out there?
I have a public comment.
Yes,
I'm really interested in this.
I'm sorry, identify
Oh,
yourself.
sorry, I'm so sorry. Linda Neiman, 59 Mallard Drive. I'm really interested in this whole process and trying to understand what's going on. Hearing that the website is gonna be updated with all this information is fantastic. I also would like to know, you know, what is the timeline and who are the point people? Like, who are the people that are pushing this, and like the owner? Like, I feel like I'm like asking all these random people, then they point me to this person, then I go to that person, then they point me to another person.
What, you say that specifically owner of what, of the public transit?
So, like, for example, like this Stantec process, like who's the person that's like, you know, kind of checking in with them and like. they're
Well,
being
right now,
contacted.
the only work being done by Stantec is being managed by the public work, by the
Town engineer.
town
When I asked
engineer.
him yesterday, he said it was TAC.
Well, we provide some direction at a policy level, but he's managing the actual work activity that's taking place.
Yeah, but you can see as a resident, I am very
Yeah.
confused by the process and who I'm supposed to be going to
Right.
get information.
I was also there yesterday. It does appear that the Public Works Commission would very much like us to essentially be a place where issues about roadways that are not car issues, like issues about pedestrians and bicyclists be heard here instead of there, because they feel that their process is not clear at all. It's very opaque.
They're the build it and maintain it department, whereas we're more the policy and department. Okay.
So what I can tell you is that from a contract management standpoint, that is the town engineers managing that contract with Stantec. So whether that remains as this the work product they're doing goes from this assessment standpoint to assist them with their budgeting for town meeting, whether that changes and it shifts over to the planning division, that hasn't been answered yet. The town is going through to hire a new director for this building for the 4 divisions. And that person may take over the management of that contract. And part of the conversation that's been happening for, I'm going to say the last 6 months or more during all of this is better defining the roles of, public works engineering. There's a transportation management group, which is town staff that looks at, I'm going to say, short-term, low-cost issues and concerns that are brought up, whether it's signage, line painting, and those types of things. And then there's the larger issues that are not construction related. And, how do those go through that process? So those roles and responsibilities, whether it's engineering, transportation management group, TAC, the select board is also involved. They have certain, jurisdiction requirements over certain things in the public roadways, and that has not been 100%, written on paper and defined. So
Yeah,
I just wanna know where we're, short of joining a committee, like where do concerned citizens come in and where do we hear our, where do we voice our concerns and participate in the process?
I think probably in general, this is a good place to do it. The reason it is the way it is, which is sort of confusing, is that the town never had a focus on transportation. And not in the planning department or anywhere. And so we're giving birth to that over the last 2 or 3 years and trying to figure out and design the processes to make that work. And the fact is, transportation is a very complex set of things, right? So it's not coming forth quickly and obviously, but it's moving forward. So I think it's become much clearer in the Transportation Advisory Committee over the last year or so, what our role is and should be in terms of developing the directions, helping the town develop the directions and the policies and the approaches. Okay, so, and hopefully our website, once we get it repopulated, and it'll be more helpful in that regard. Okay,
Thank you.
thank you.
you have Mark and Marianne.
Mark. No, Mariana. Mark's talked twice or 3 times already. Mariana.
Mariana can go first. That's fine.
Thanks. I was just going to add that we did have a public survey open. We held a meeting and it had a public web survey. I don't know if you can still submit comments to that after the fact, but someone else had submitted a comment to the TAC that we were able to review, and I thought that was a helpful way to submit specific feedback. I think we're eventually having another meeting too, right? Public meeting. Some good ways to submit feedback.
Mark?
Hi, thanks. A couple things. One is with regard to Linda's question about who's managing contracts and things. I also want to mention once again that there are two separate contracts. There's an original sort of more high level planning contract with a Stantec group who are planners, which is called the Comprehensive Transportation and Mobility Study, and there's been public outreach, and it's now kind of time to figure out how most productively and actively to spend remaining money under that first contract. And then there's a completely separate second contract, a lot of which is more engineering focused, and that separately funded and separately, has a separate statement of work contract. The urgent time critical path to the next town meeting is one piece of that to support bonding requests. So over 5 years, $5 million a year to bring the roads up to a good functional and maintainable condition. And there's also evaluation of sidewalks, and there's also separately, which is not quite as time critical, of course, interacting with MassDOT and their engineering consultants on things that have come up in the Route 2 corridor study that MassDOT and VHB Engineering had presented. So just keep in mind there are two separate contracts, and with regard to providing more analysis, information, and actionable paths for public transit, it could be in either one of those. The first one would be more on a high planning level, but I think that the second one might, it may also be possible to have some work done there. Separately, with regard to what Linda is asking about how people give public input, I think Nick is right. We're still trying to figure this out, but one thing that I think Elizabeth is aware of is, and I've mentioned it a few times at meetings, it'd be good if, it might be helpful if we develop a process where there's a central gathering place for public letters concerning transportation issues, safety, signage, things like that, condition of public infrastructure concerns. And this is kind of in the process of being figured out. But if we have a central repository, a log of that, then we can also simultaneously help indicate to the public that the best way to get this information to the people who are going to use it is to send it to a certain place. So in the meantime, TAC is certainly one place. There is traffic management group, but I think the sending notes to the select board or the town manager is not necessarily the best process, because things are going to go from one person to another to another. We need to have a funnel for inputs about transportation concerns and infrastructure. So I think we're working on that.
So just to follow up on that piece, that is currently a question that has not been answered. I can tell you that the previous answer would have been that's what the transportation planner was going to be helping with and focusing on. So since that is not happening, that, something like that question has not been answered. I can tell you currently is not something that the current planning division can absorb to do, managing and tracking public comment. But there may be, the possibility for, some type of, public comment form. Mariana had mentioned there was submit your comment for the original public outreach for the transportation and mobility plan, whether there's now an option to take something similar and have that, auto generate, a running comment list or something. So that's something that, that we're looking into.
Okay. Okay, let's see, moving on.
Pat has
Yeah.
a question.
Sorry, who did?
Pat
Oh,
Nelson?
Pat, yes. Hi, Pat.
Thank you. I'm Pat Nelson. I'm on the planning board, and so I'm here to be sort of your connection with the planning board. But I have a question, or I just want to make sure I am understanding this as I'm trying to understand what TAC is about. That in regards to Stantec, where TAC puts its primary energy is the transportation and public mobility study. The engineering support or the engineering piece of that Stantec contracts is really in the engineering department with the town. I'm just trying to see, what is the
Well,
scope
yes.
of work that you're trying to
The
focus
history
on?
of that is probably instructive, which is that the original Stantec study was to do this comprehensive study on planning for transportation. And they began that and it got to a certain point, and then in the work that TAC and Public Works and the planning department were doing, it became obvious that there were some urgent needs related to budgeting and capital planning for maintenance of the roads and sidewalks. And it was decided that it was at first hope we could divert some of the existing Stantec money to that had been approved to do that work. But it turned out it needed to be a separate type of contract. So another contract was written with Stantec to work specifically on the budgeting, supporting the budgeting process for roads, both maintenance and enhancements.
Mark has his hand up.
Yeah. I'm sorry.
Mark has his hand up.
Okay, and so anyway, so that's why there are two of them. And the first one is sort of in abeyance at the moment. There's no work being done on that. And that's the planning thing. The reason it was split was the first contract was for planning work. The second contract was more for engineering work, so it had to be a separate contract. Mark?
Yeah, I just wanted to add to that, for Pat's information, it's a good, good question for clarifying. So I think both of the role of TAC as being advisory and trying to listen to the public and set sort of goals and positive action directions. Both of these contracts are aligned with and in support of actions and goals that TAC has already declared. And with the fact that implementation of better road and sidewalk infrastructure is an engineering task to actually implement does not mean it isn't aligned with important transportation policy goals. So these contracts have to, at least it's my opinion or understanding, these contracts have to be managed by staff, and TAC shouldn't micromanage things that staff is much better able to do and legally empowered to do, because it's a contract with the town. It's not a contract with TAC. But TAC can, on this high level, on behalf of the whole community, listen to what people want and try to clarify directions, goals, and important actions and priorities, trying to prioritize things. So I would say both contracts are in service of what TAC is trying to do.
Yeah, and Pat,
Thank you.
what TAC is trying to do is really embodied in that vision document that we recently approved that I believe is on the website now, right?
Yeah, I've looked at it, and I'll look at it again. This discussion helps clarify some of that.
Yeah, okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Okay.
So I have one further comment just to put out there, and that is, the contract calls for some very aggressive timelines. So I think the public should be aware that, for example, the contract as it's written calls for an analysis to be done by Stantec on developing high priority locations for work by December 20th. So that's effectively a month from now, with Thanksgiving in
Right.
between. So, how that's going to happen in a month is something I don't really know, but hopefully we'll get some information.
That's
from
what's
the
being
town.
managed. I
Right.
talked to Steve and he said that that's the commitment. That's still the schedule.
Yeah, so we'll find out.
Okay. Okay, we finally move on to the next topic, which is yours, Phil.
I mean, the last time I attended a meeting, you talked for an hour and a half on just about the signage at the Concord Junction Park. And I had to leave because my laptop died.
Oh, no.
Oh, no.
That's how long you were talking.
So,
Hopefully you brought
okay,
an
just
extra battery.
some context. So, Phil, this topics on the control of motors, I generalized the title to controlling motor vehicle speeds, but why don't you explain why this came about and what your interest is and what you're pushing for?
So my interest in this cropped up several years ago during the pandemic. It arose in part because the signage in the town indicated that the town had adopted a state law which permits reduction of the speed limit to 25 miles an hour in densely, I think the phrase is densely developed neighborhoods. But with respect to many of those signs within, 10 or 30 feet, there was a second sign with a different speed limit right next to it, which, was curious to me. First of all, because I didn't know what the speed limit was. And second of all, it just seemed to me to be something that had not really been considered. So
It was required by state law.
well, it's actually, it required quite a bit of digging to discover that Concord has adopted speed zoning, which is a concept that's set forth in state law. Many of the roads that have different speed limits were subject to speed studies that were undertaken at various periods of time, beginning in the post-war era, meaning the post-World War II era, and then running up into the 1980s. One of the things as the sort of self-appointed bicycle guy is as a bicyclist on the road, vehicle speeds are pretty, much of a concern. Cars going very fast, cars coming too close are the kinds of things that cause bicycle accidents, bicycle vehicle accidents. So I began an investigation. What happened was that I had a series of conversations with Terry Ackerman about how the select board chose to adopt the 25-mile-an-hour policy, what their expectations were at that time. And then I realized that there was kind of a disconnect between what the select board thought that they were undertaking at the time, which was about 4 or 5 years ago, and what the actual result was. And the actual result was 2 different signs with 2 different speed limits. And that being the, sort of the result of the somewhat contradictory state laws. Over the course of that period of time, the state has actually adopted a new policy. So at the beginning of that undertaking, the common refrain was, if you want to change the speed limit, you have to be careful what you wish for. Because if you try to change the speed limit, not only do you have to undertake a speed study, which has a fairly substantial cost to it, but you might.
Plus a risk you may not get the answer you want.
Right, plus the risk that you may not get the answer that you want, which is under the speed zoning concept, that the speed limit will be set at 80% of what people are driving. Okay, that is a very 1950s, 1960s concept of how to manage roadways. I'll say, as a bicyclist and pedestrian, that's also a recipe for traffic collisions, injury, and death on the road. Because letting people decide based on old infrastructure, and their personal preferences for going fast, what the safe speed limit should be is how you come up with the number of traffic fatalities that we have in the United States in general. I'm not the only person to come to this conclusion. The State Highway Department has come to this conclusion as well. And as a result of that, the state changed their policy over the last couple of years. First, to provide that in order for a community to get out of the speed zoning approach to speed limits, it was not necessary to do a speed study, that the municipality could revoke the speed study, the speed zoning by action of the municipal body that adopted it in the first place. So, for example, in a town, if the select board chose, they could vote to revoke speed zoning either on specific roads or on all roads in the town. And that revocation would be reviewed by the MassDOT regional district and then applied. And examples of that happening have now occurred in a number of municipalities. So for example, in Andover, it's a townwide thing. In Newburyport, they did it on a road by road basis. And in each case, the practical way that it has worked out is that MassDOT has actually responded and provided their approval of the municipal decision making. The reason why this really came out, to be very candid with you, is that there have been a number of traffic accidents. There were some accidents during the course of the last few years in Concord. Unfortunately, there was a death of a Concord resident in Bedford at the Reformatory Branch Trail crossing at Route 62. And there was another fatality a little bit further east on Route 62, also in Bedford, where the crosswalk at the church, almost where you come up at Route 225 occurred. That occurred a couple of weeks ago. And in both cases, the situation was that a pedestrian was legally in the crosswalk. The vehicle failed to stop for various reasons, and there was a fatality. My concern is that I think it's fair to say speed kills. That is a meme of the National Highway Transportation Safety Board. And I think what Concord should do is examine the issue. It should revoke the speed zoning either townwide or, based on what we recommend on specific streets, and implement the policy of lower speed limits in various locations. There's no question that this is a controversial thing. However, I think that it's the right thing to do. And, based on what I've been able to find out, asking questions and, reviewing the legal requirements, it is now under both state law and good practices to undertake stuff like this. So we are not going to be sticking our necks out. We will not be the first town to try to do something like this. We are,
Amazing. Usually we are.
we are following well-established precedent that's happened in other towns and other and cities, where the municipalities have chosen to lower speed limits to promote safety and to actually help to bring the sort of complete streets and sharing the road kind of stuff to fruition.
So, ask a question, the 20, so I see like in all the families that are entering to Commonwealth Avenue, or so the 25 mile an hour speed limit in densely populated areas, that's
Unless
not,
otherwise posted.
yeah,
Unless
that's
otherwise-
not revoking speed, that's existing in conjunction with, speed zoning?
Right, so
Yes.
both
Okay,
things
all right.
exist right
So
now.
the speed zones
Alright.
take precedence and all the signs,
I got it.
if
Okay.
people really read them, all the first sign says when you enter Concord is unless otherwise
I-
posted, that's 25. Now, the problem with the posting is they never tell you when the 30-mile-an-hour zone ends.
Right.
Right,
For 25.
So there's
and there were
totally
also
confusion.
roads like Old Marlboro Road, and this, I think this is a great example of it, where. I'm not sure who undertook to do this, and when it was done, it was quite a long time ago. But the speed goes at various speeds, at various locations, in very short
Right,
increments.
right.
So it goes from
Drives you nuts.
25 to 35 to 40, back to 35, all within a mile or
And a
so.
school zone.
And then there's a school zone.
Not the rifle range, it's awful. It's
Right.
just like in-
So, these are the kind of things where I think it can be rationalized and we
Yeah,
can
let's-
make recommendations to.
I want to
make
make a couple of comments.
Sure.
Did you need something to say?
No, go,
Okay.
I'll wrap up when you're done.
My goal is to reduce speeds, okay? I do not believe changing speed limits does it at all, because speed limits are not enforced in this state, not at the municipal level, not at the state level. If you drive on the Mass Pike or 128, especially during rush hour, the limit may be 55, but they're going 70. And in Concord, I only know of 2 or 3 places where the police ever enforce it, right? Like on Cambridge Turnpike in the morning eastbound, and by the cemetery in the afternoons, right? And there are probably a couple of others, but speed limits are not enforced. And unless, if you want to use speed limits as a mechanism, you need to do something about enforcement and education. So my general take is, I'd rather do things to engineer and stripe the roads to actually control speeds, because I think it's more effective in the short run. Although the work is more long run.
Yeah, and I actually agree with you. I guess my rejoinder to that is both things have to happen. And one thing can happen through policy changes and really doesn't cost anything. There's no cost to making a policy change other than changing signs.
No, enforcement is
But
cost.
but there is an enforcement cost, and there's certainly going to be a cost for changing infrastructure or changing road design. And given the fact that the cost of changing infrastructure and road design is so high,
It doesn't have
it
to
seems
be.
like, it doesn't have to be, but
I
it
think,
seems like
as you're
the,
saying, I think it's both, and I think there are elements of road design and striping and other things that can be, and bumps that can be done that are not very expensive and can be done in the shorter term in the places where they're most needed, right? That's where you can afford to spend the money in the short term. But personally, I'd rather see the focus on effective speed reduction rather than just doing the speed limit thing, because what's going to happen with the speed limit thing is what's happening now is the police don't enforce it, A, because they don't have enough money for the people, staff to do it, and B, because the residents will not tolerate it. If I get hit twice with speed tickets in Concord and my insurance goes up $400 or $500 a year, I'm gonna be one unhappy citizen.
I guess the flip side of that, to be candid with you, is when someone gets hurt, the inconvenience or upset about a speeding ticket seems very small potatoes.
Yeah, no, but it happens to a different person.
I
That's the
understand.
problem.
But sometimes and this is my hope that we can make a recommendations to the select board that they will buy into, is
Okay,
that
that's where
sometimes you have
I'm
to
jumping
strap a
Okay.
set on and just say, we're gonna do this because it's in the interest of public safety, and we are going to withstand complaints from people who just want to get there
Unless
faster.
you enforce, if you're gonna do enforcement too,
Well,
I'm willing to
it's
listen,
a
but
conversation.
if you're not gonna do enforcement, it's purely a political thing. It's
But
purely political.
Okay,
go ahead, sorry,
Okay.
Elizabeth, I know you want to talk.
no,
And
I'll go last, so,
Go ahead. Charlie.
I was going to say, since the meeting started, I was on my laptop looking up some stuff. And since you're all talking about it, something that's been happening at a national level, both here and in Europe and Africa, is governments have been mandating the installation of speed limiting devices in cars. The US government hasn't done it yet, but there is a bill in California to
You
do
think
it.
Trump will allow that, huh?
Actually, that's the other thing.
You know
The
better than to say
IIHS
things like
says that 50% of drivers are perfectly fine with the installation of a device in their car that would prevent them from going over the speed limit. 60% are fine with just a device that gives them an audible warning when they go over the speed limit.
And none of
Okay.
the respondents were from Massachusetts.
Right. So, I mean, I would say I kind of
Just
like,
kidding.
yeah, right. I think it's both, but I would say as a driver, I find the confusing signs more annoying than anything else. And so it almost invites non-compliance because it's so confusing. You kind of say, well, the heck with, I'll throw my hands up. So I really think that getting rid of, persuaded by Phil's argument, getting rid of speed zoning is essential. And then, you know, whether it's enforced or not, it's kind of good public policy. And then, yes, there are probably plenty of ways to put in bumps, to put in bump outs or whatever, to in specific areas that are hotspots, which is what you're talking about next to it. Let me finish, to address that, because I think there are hotspots that are a problem, and, you know, connecting you with other towns into Bedford is, you know, really bad. But I think the signage is such a mess
Yeah.
that people just say, well, obviously, it doesn't matter because it's confusing, and whether it's enforced or not, that's the impression it gives in the town of Concord. So I think I would vote for revoking the speed zoning. Now, Elizabeth, tell me.
Now it's
do
my
it.
turn.
Another question.
Um,
Oh, yeah, we have members too. Mark, go ahead.
I'll defer to Laura because I think she had her hand up longer.
Oh, I'm sorry, I didn't see it with the background.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, sorry, my screen is not. So I wanted to just second Ellen. I think that you put it really well. It's a yes and for me. I think that our current speed zones don't make a lot of sense. A lot of people have brought this up. This has been I think that there's going to be more broad support for this than has been discussed, because every time I speak to anybody about transportation in Concord, confusing speed zones, it comes up, and people drive too fast comes up. So I actually think there will be broad public support for efforts to reduce speed. And I also agree with you, Nick, this is not enough. And, you know, because I saw this was on the agenda, I did pull up the MassDOT. I highly recommend all committee members read MassDOT's Learn About Speed Management page. It's a very helpful web page that goes over what MassDOT recommends in terms of how to reduce speed in a community. And, you know, what they recommend is establishing a target speed as a first step. Like what speed do we actually want people to be traveling at? And then designing for that speed. And then, you know, also raising awareness and setting speed limits. So I think all of those things have to work in conjunction. But yeah, I'd say for me, it's very much a yes and I hope that Elizabeth is going to tell us A, if we can do this, and B, how we could do this, because I'd like to know.
I'm gonna say the how, not the can.
Okay, yes, the how that's my question. It's like, is this something we could vote on today? Do we need to write up a proposal and vote on it at our next meeting?
So I don't know, you had public comment and Mark has a
Okay.
comment as well.
Mark, go ahead, you're next. Members first.
Okay, thanks very much. Yeah, I agree. Both and makes a lot of sense. I think it's an interesting idea to talk about establishing target speeds, and you know, that's something somebody could be asked to do. I agree. The signs, the fact that the confusion of too many signs, speed up, speed down. I mean, it's almost like you're going along at a certain speed, you see a sign that's higher, you're supposed to go faster. No, not necessarily. I also wonder if I don't know anything about this, so this might be misleading, but I know that in some cases, the physical design of the highway is limited, or the best practice, or, you know, whatever, by what the expected maximum speed is. So there might be an additional interaction and enabling by setting the speed limits lower to enable other infrastructure configurations, or at least support them, if you know what I mean. In other words, if it's speed zone and it says 35 or 40, there may be some infrastructure things to slow traffic that are deemed not appropriate because that is the nominal speed limit on the road. Whereas if you made it lower, it may actually enable other infrastructure choices. And further, longer term, I really do think that the leverage from saying that enforcement is inadequate and the police don't have enough resources to do it, I really do think that a long-term effort to change the state law so that at least in school zones there can be electronic enforcement is really necessary. You know, who is going to object to that in school zones? But that's maybe beyond our scope. Thanks.
Definitely.
Yeah.
Yes,
So Kristen Tolfree, 1400 Lowell Road. I am also a biker. I use Lowell Road to commute almost every day. And I live at Middlesex School, and we have personally been affected by the speed zones. We have been trying to get a crosswalk from the entrance of Middlesex School across the road to other community members live across the road. There's a preschool there, and people cross that road every day, multiple times a day. It's 40 miles per hour there, and we have not been able to get a crosswalk there because of speed zoning, and they will not approve it because the speed limit is too fast. They won't approve it. The school has tried to get a crosswalk, and it won't has yet to be approved.
Wow.
I can tell you that the existing crosswalk that's a little further down the hill,
Yes.
that will be moved.
Is it coming to the front of the school?
Um,
To the school?
Before the field house,
So it's going further down?
no, before the occupancy is issued for that field house, Middlesex School will be having their engineers do the study and, what is required to move that crosswalk up. That's part of condition of approval.
that's good.
It's great. I mean, there's literally every single bus stops there, like all the
Yeah.
school buses. It's crazy. It's
Yeah.
crazy. There isn't one there.
It'll-
And the sidewalk ends,
So where would that be? Near the nursery school? Near the
Yeah,
school?
yeah,
Yeah, okay,
yeah,
good.
right there.
the entrance of Middlesex
Yeah.
School.
So this is, Elizabeth actually, sorry to
Okay.
interject, but she actually kind of reinforces my point. The cost, additional cost for that project is being borne by the school, that's
Yeah.
fine, but you know, it's so hard to do what should be a relatively simple thing, install a crosswalk. It
Right,
shouldn't be that hard. So
and it is.
that's one of the reasons.
I would enforce
No.
what you're pushing for with the speed limits for the sake of making it easier to install crosswalks.
Right, that's,
That was definitely.
Okay, so, cause you only have 10 minutes
Yep.
left
Right.
and then, I have to leave.
Okay,
So I'm gonna follow up and say, this is, you know, this is a much larger conversation. This is not just a memo that you send off to the select board. So this, my recommendation would be to, you know,
write another
TAC
paper.
well, no, yes, you know, sadly, right, put this in a memo, have TAC to vote on, but that memo should start with Concord Public Works Commission and Concord Public Works Engineering, and have that conversation with them.
Yep.
And, you know, CC the select board saying, we're starting this conversation with you. You know, this is, you know, what, you know, we'd like to investigate. This is, you know, the reasons why, this is what we, and start that conversation with them. And
Phil,
because
I've
for,
so it's my cross to bear, and I thank you for
I-
laying out the
Yeah.
way.
I've offered to work it with you so that has both components in it.
I think that would be great.
Yeah.
That's
And-
that's a great
and then,
path
you
to
know,
follow.
from there, it's that conversation, it's understanding the, you know, limitations and parameters that engineering is, you know, and different things. And then from there, it becomes a more unified voice that then goes to the next step of taking it to the select board and the select board having to go through, you know, that process. It also, provides that opportunity to investigate, what are the legal, parameters, whether you're talking about adoption of a new general bylaw.
The town,
Um,
the 25 mile-an-hour one we adopted was a bylaw, so
Yeah.
I'm sure that we have to go to town meeting to make
So-
any changes.
Oh, no, you definitely have to go to town meeting, but is it just amending that existing bylaw, or is
Yeah,
it?
that's bigger
So
question,
that's, that can be answered down the road, but right now you need to have that conversation with Public Works Commission and engineering.
Yep, so that's a good,
Yeah.
thank you for laying out the path.
There you
Yes,
go.
and I absolutely will volunteer and happy to do it.
Okay, those are the agenda topics. Terry, any comments today, liaison? Are you there? Terry Ackerman? Well.
I'm here. I'm here, I just, okay. Yes, select board, did agree and voted that 25 mile-an-hour speed zoning several years ago. But I guess that's not enough, so I think I agree with Elizabeth. Let's have a lot of conversations and get this right.
Thank you. Any public comments?
Oh, I had one more thing. I
Go
want
ahead.
to thank Laura.
One other thing,
I
too.
know, Laura, you're leaving the board, and I wanted to thank you for your wonderful service. You've been energetic and dedicated, and thank you for everything you've done.
Yes, thank you. I should probably say that, yeah, I'm planning to leave the board by the end of the year. So I think next meeting will be my last meeting.
We'll miss you.
Thanks for
Yeah,
all.
and it's because I'm moving out of town. It's not, I will miss you all.
Thank you. Nick,
I have
Nick?
Mark, yes.
Yeah, just
Yes, Mark.
technical point. It might be good to clarify who's going to write the minutes and get the video sent to them.
No, I'm just taking notes, but
Oh, were we
was
doing it
supposed to?
alphabetical and
Yeah,
didn't I
I
do
did the
the-
last round, so you're
Oh, I-
off the hook. I
Okay,
did the last meeting.
PQ.
oh, okay, I got it.
It's alphabetical, right?
Yeah.
I think it was, yeah.
All
Okay.
right, Jill.
And then I only have one other update. We've got notification yesterday, day before. We were successful in getting our Safe Routes to School Signs and Lines grant for the
Yay.
Thoreau
Oh,
School.
good job.
So
Good
that's
job.
a $10,000 grant to implement different signage and striping improvements based on the Thoreau School walk audit. So
Oh, that's great.
that's
That's great.
yeah, and I believe we were also successful and we're moving forward with a Alcott School walk audit.
Right.
So and yeah, so that was exciting.
Thank you so much.
Did you get a grant on Alcott or just you're gonna apply?
So that's just that's just technical assistance. You don't have to.
Oh, okay.
You know,
So
it's not
there's a
like a
process
grant,
thing
yeah.
that the technical assistance is free,
Yes.
and then you go through their program and then you're eligible to.
So
Great.
yeah.
And then, bigger grants. So,
Yeah,
thank you. That's great work.
we're gonna keep chugging away.
Okay.
That's really terrific.
Thank you. Meeting's adjourned.
Okay.